Hi, I'm Will Cedric.
I'm Gabe.
And this is Inside the Bot. Gabe.
What's been happening? What have we been up to?
Well,
I have noticed.
What's that?
I've been noticing there's a lot of disappointment. It's like a mini news section now, and there's a lot of disappointment. Disappointed teams who've not got into RW. Starting to post up now. I'm not in. And do you know what I say to them?
Do you know what? No, before that,
What?
it's quicker to say Robot Wars than RW.
It is, isn't it? It's just,
And I don't know why you do it.
when I type, I think it must be like a builder thing. You start to, it's BB or
RW.
RW. I used to work with other people's poop. We
Stop
got time.
No, we're not doing this. Not going back there.
I can't help it. You were talking about him using some of the runnier version as a glaze, didn't you? Tell
That
us
was
what
in
you
our
said.
own time. Let's not
You
discuss.
can't not stop talking about him.
That was in our personal times.
We need a guest. We need him as a guest. He's got to come
We're
on.
going to have a Matt special.
So,
It's going to be poop-tastic.
people have been not getting onto RW. We don't know who's on RW yet. Robot Wars Series 2. We don't know who's on. We don't know the list. It's
The big question
What?
is Razor.
Oh,
I know. Do you know?
I know. And you guys will know next week. That's like our soap cliffhanger.
I love that.
I love
People
it.
got so salty. I
There's
liked
a
it.
lot of salt around from that. But, it was too long. We needed to separate it up. And do you know what we got today? Even better. We got Paul Ventimiglia.
But Paul is super long as well. Well,
He's
not
so-
like that. Steady.
Steady there, steady. We haven't seen it. You also noted.
I've heard
He's-
that. Oh, no, I haven't heard.
No, he was fully clothed. He's not like Jason.
He might not have been fully clothed.
He may
It was over Skype.
Did you not have a picture on?
No picture.
Oh,
Suspiciously no picture.
suspicious. That is suspicious. Now, do you know what happened?
Go on.
I'm going to give everyone a health warning.
Oh, yeah. Things got weird.
There's got to be a health warning, and he knows what he did. But basically, after he's interviewed, he listened to pretty much, I reckon, Inside the Bot back to back.
I think he did the whole thing.
And the problem is he started on our Series 1 when we went back in time. And you know what? That much Inside the Bot back to back is going to bend anyone's
It's going to do
mind.
things to you.
Will Bales was pretty weird. In it, he wasn't. He was pretty weird. When he started was hanging about, not knowing what to do, we had to keep on G'ing him up. And then he
Yeah.
wanted to touch himself and his brother. That's going to bend anyone's mind.
I
isn't it?
remember that, actually. Yeah.
So I really say to people, listen to one Inside the Bot, maybe one. If you're really going to be brave, and you're resting on a sofa, comfortably, with a cup of tea and a crumpet, listen to two, but no more than two.
Take breaks.
You've
as
got
well.
to take breaks.
Otherwise, you end up like Rob, your teammate.
He listens to a lot of Inside the Bot,
And
he hasn't taken breaks.
Have you noticed a change in him?
Yeah, I have.
Is
It's
he just walks around just wearing that leather pouch now?
starting to affect him in his personal life, I think, as well. And I don't want that to happen to you guys. So please, we're like paracetamol. You're not allowed to buy more than 2 packets at a time. In the shop,
Yeah,
they take them off you.
And
I'm
I
not
think-
sure if that's the same in the States, but in the UK, you're not allowed to buy too many pills. So they always say, hey buddy, look,
Come
he's
on.
back on them. No one hurts that
We've
much.
all had a bit of fun here.
We've all had some fun.
Stop buying so much paracetamol.
You don't need this many paracetamols. So they take them off you. And I'm going to say the same with Inside the Bot. So you can have 2, and then, but with a healthy break between them, 10
Just a
minutes
little
of
health warning.
downtime.
And this one's super long. Maybe just listen to this one.
This one, no, but it's not so much the actual length of it. It's more the oddness from you.
The weirdness concentration of it
Oddness from you and Will Bales.
is...
Because I'm trying to do we talked about this before, I'm trying to do a serious Rebel podcast.
And I want to. And then Will Bales comes on and
He makes it
he
weird.
just injects some weirdness into
Just some
it.
strangeness there. I don't know where it comes from. And, so that's that. And then also, we've been... I've been inundated from Craig. Keep getting a message from him. When's my podcast? He's calling it his podcast now. When's my podcast coming out? He's craving this. So Inside the Bot's become like a bit like a hard drug for him. He now needs it. He's trying to intravenously take it.
Sorry, you've just said Craig. I mean,
Well,
who?
I'm not going to give you his other name. Just call him Craig.
Oh,
And
okay.
then when he's listened to a lot of Inside the Bot, he then feeds me really, really good roboteering nuggets on how to fight. Some nice little touches today.
So
he's trying to. Maybe is he trying to groom me?
I think you're being groomed by Craig.
Dear. Well, I feel shiny. My coat's all nice, like a horse pony. So Craig's making it weird now.
So you're being groomed. That's in the news.
I'm being groomed. I'm going to a gym corner. I hope I manage all the jumps.
What? It's got weird.
Sorry. Oh my god. Craig, stop it. Stop grooming people. Stop grooming me on the internet.
Especially Gabe. It's
just wrong. But
you
I
can do better than that.
I do love his nuggets of
What?
his nuggets of how to fight robots. I'm sorry, I can't help it.
He's been giving you nuggets now as well.
Stop it. Right, I can't. Right.
You're gonna have
So
to
can we?
compose yourself.
This is going to. Well, I'll listen to Paul. Right, Paul.
Let's hope Paul.
Now Paul goes on a bit.
It doesn't go on.
He goes on a bit.
It's long because we should have had him on a lot of times.
You're right.
I mean, he's amazingly in season 2.
No,
he's in season
I'm
1.
not knocking him. I'm not knocking him.
Season 1.
It's a powerful listen. But what I'm saying is,
There's a lot of him.
I'm saying, don't get furious because it's so long.
And we could have split it into 2.
He also, I noticed, knocks a certain speed controller halfway through.
Does he?
Which is a worry, yeah, because they're the ones I've got. So
You should have spoken to him.
I know. I don't want him giving me his badness. I got my witch doctor totem. I'm not going to let that sort of negative attitude get in the way.
He did win BattleBots.
Yeah, by accident.
What?
I'm just joking.
Well, let's hear what he's got to say about it, yeah?
Let's hear from Paul.
So, Paul, welcome to Inside the Bot.
Thanks for having me.
Now, for anyone who hasn't watched season 2, and season 1, in fact, just go away, come back in a while, because Paul is the captain of, and I want to get the right team name.
Aptyx Designs.
Okay, so Team Aptyx Designs?
Yes.
Cool. With Robot Bite Force, and he is the Series 1 champ. And
That's correct.
And you did pretty well in season 2 as well. I'm not going to have anyone say you didn't. It was rubbish. It was a bullshit hit. I mean, the chain, what the hell?
Yeah, it happens. I mean, it's also their sole goal, so you can say it's lucky, but it's also the main point of the robot.
Shall we just dive right in?
Sure.
So, the early bots. How did it start?
Early, way back in the day, like Lego robots when I was a kid.
Oh, okay, yeah, we'll go all the way back.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much it was just watching movies like Star Wars and Terminator and all that, and thinking robots are really cool.
Yeah.
And then I think that messing around with Legos is really the first time where I started playing with gears and wheels and little mobile robots. And then when I was about 13, I was searching on just dial-up internet for robots, and I came across the Robot Wars website.
Okay.
So this was way back in the day. This was probably like around 98, 99.
Uh-huh.
The website was still up, but it wasn't really active, and it had like a rules page maybe. I thought that sounded really cool, and my brother and I were looking at it and talking about building a robot, but of course we didn't know anything, and my parents don't have like a real technical background or anything.
Yeah.
So then nothing happened from it, but then about a year later, or a year or two later, I guess, BattleBots went on the Series 1 on Comedy Central.
Okay.
And so we could see that it was a real thing. And I was totally hooked from just watching it. And really my first real robot was a BattleBot for Season 3.0 is when I was ready to compete.
Mm-hmm.
And, a garage bot built with a jigsaw and a hacksaw and hand drill and all that.
What sort of materials were you using?
Actually, the first robot was built of legit materials. It was aluminum and polycarbonate, and it had even like a little linear actuator from McMaster.
Okay.
So it was sort of one of those things where I could read the website of the early good builders. So especially it was like Team Delta, Dan Danknick, and Derek Young's website, and Jim Smintowski's website, and Christian Kollerberg. They all had great information about what kind of parts and materials to use.
Okay.
And Online Metals existed, and McMaster was there So it was pretty easy actually to start with building with real materials.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot more material, kind of, well, not material, but resources available to anyone who wants to start now.
Sure, and yet those same two websites are pretty much go-to sources for a lot of builders.
So what was that robot called, the first one you made?
That was called Tantrum. It was
Oh,
a
that's
lightweight,
Tantrum, okay.
60 pounds, so about 25 kilos. And it had a lifter, and it did horribly. It just was one of the several hundred robots that had one fight and lost to a decision. It only lost by like a point or two in the judges thing, I think, but the robot just did horribly in the sense that it couldn't even turn in place. So it had four-wheel drive and it had relay controls, so it was bang controls, but there wasn't enough reduction. I only could fit one stage of reduction, and so the motors didn't have enough torque to turn the robot. So I'd have to move forward and then tell it to turn, and it could turn about 90 degrees, and then do that again.
So a bit more basic than Bite Force then.
Yeah, it was a lifter, I guess.
Yeah.
It was the only other robot I built, I guess, and that really didn't have any weapon, or any destructive weapon.
You went back to your roots for BattleBots reboot then.
I guess so. The real reason for that was mainly due to time constraints.
Yeah,
we were an alternate, and so being an alternate has a few caveats besides the time reduction. Is also it's much bigger financial risk exponentially to me, because we can't even go out and get sponsors if you're not going to be saying you're on the show. And then it's hard to get your teammates to take off work and spend time on the robot that might not even be able to compete.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
So that made it really, really exponentially challenging being an alternate.
Whereas, if you're guaranteed, you can just order e-techs like they're nobody's business.
Sure. Yeah, you could.
We'll talk about that later, though. There's some questions that are coming about that.
I saw some questions.
So we had Tantrum. And then what's after that? Green Wave?
Yeah, I think so. Right after that, there was what they called BattleBots IQ, which was the high school only division. So I competed when I was about 14 in my first BattleBots. And then a few months later, they had this high school competition, which sounded perfect because it was bigger robots, 120 pounds, and a little more of an excuse to build something new. Mm-hmm. And so I built my first overhead bar spinner that was in the style of Hazard. And one of my favorite robots of all time. That robot did okay at that event because so many people were brand new to building robots. So the robot wasn't good or anything. Every time the weapon would hit something, it would sort of destroy itself, sort of the standard spinners that break themselves type scenario.
A classic design.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes the bar would go flying off, or my first match, I knocked out the opponent, but every single electrical connection in the entire robot popped off. So I was just using the power poles, but I realized that the forces of BattleBots are too strong even for like the Anderson power poles. So then I learned that you have to tape or zip tie every single electrical connection in addition to just plugging it in.
Yeah.
So each match was sort of a very high learning curve of this will break and then how do you fix it. And I ended up meeting a ton of builders there that ended up becoming lifelong friends.
Yeah.
And really helped people there. So that was a great event.
I mean, you need to have events to go to just find out what's going to break.
Oh, yeah. And there was a big learning curve back then. And so I think my robot, won at least, several matches, 3 or 4 matches. And there was a good number, about 50 or so robots that showed up for this first event. And I think that Trey and Greg ended up giving me a made-up award. They made it up at the event. It was called the Hardest Working Team Award because it was a team of 1 at the time. So it was myself and my parents were there. And so pretty much my dad would help out when I was at the event.
He'd help you lift it.
Yeah, no, he'd help work on the robot.
Oh, okay, cool.
And even so, just all sorts of things. Like they saw that I didn't have a good drill or anything, so I think they went out and got me a drill as the prize, and I still had that drill for 10 years later. So getting the right tools was still a very slow process because obviously BattleBots are very expensive. So over time, you acquire more tools and better tools, and it becomes easier.
That's nice. That's a nice story. Mm-hmm. How long did you use Green Wave for?
So my high school was called the mascot's Green Wave.
Okay.
So that was that's why the robot was first called that, and there were different versions. So I guess in IQ2 was where I'm trying to think. I think I made the first where it was the motor over the spinning shell, and no one's really seen pictures of this robot This is pre-YouTube and pre-good digital cameras
Okay.
and things.
Do you have any
And
pictures
so
around?
I do. I could try and scrounge them up.
That'd be
but
awesome.
Basically, it had a very low, like 3-inch tall shell, and it was built out of a square shape because I could build that in my garage. So it had like a 1/4-inch aluminum top and then 3/4-inch by 3-inch aluminum sides, and then some steel teeth bolted on the bottom and top edges. And it had an E-Tech over the spinning weapon in a middleweight with a full battery array, like similar to the power of Megabyte, but in like a middleweight robot back in 2002 or so. It was really fun because it was very destructive and powerful, and had a dinky little drivetrain, like 2 little DeWalt drills to move the whole robot, and it did okay. And then that's sort of where that inspiration for Ice Wave came, with the motor over to fit a very large weapon motor over a light or a short shell, so that way the shell can be very dense and strong and keep your CG low, but have an absurdly large physically motor powering it.
That's awesome. And then, so Brutality, I guess, is kind of a evolution of Green Wave?
Yeah, correct. So Brutality was neat because Dave Calkins was running Robo Games for years, and he saw dwindling larger robots. So after BattleBots went off the air, there were a lot less heavyweights and, of course, less super heavyweights. And so he had the idea of holding a prize money event to try and get out some of the old veteran builders and encourage new robots to be built also. And for me, that worked. So that was in November of 2006, I believe.
Okay.
I took all the parts I had for my middleweight at the time, which there was a middleweight version of Brutality that competed in the college division of BattleBots IQ, and it won that event, and it worked pretty well. It had one of the D-Pack motors, so it's a theoretical like 14 horsepower, and similar. The robot was very close in all of its specs to the middleweight Hazard. So it was an overhead bar spinner with a lot of horsepower, and had a wedge, so if the weapon broke, you could still win matches, which comes back to every battle I'll fight in the future. And so the Combat's Cup, he announced it, a $10,000 prize. And so I took all the parts I had for the middleweight and the spares and basically built a heavyweight that had 2 of everything in it. So it had the 2 D-packs for the weapon, and then it had all of my batteries I owned basically in the robot at once. And I was able to buy some used little short mag motors and gearboxes from, I think from Dix Duplich at the time. And I was at my second year in college at WPI, and they have a great shop facility and all this stuff. So it was my first time using the big shop tools to build a robot. And threw that robot together, and it did okay. That's where I was able to actually fight Biohazard, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And beat Biohazard. Well, Megabyte softened them up really well. And then Carlo brought the robot home at night. So he only lives about a half hour away from where the event took place. And he repaired it to the best he could. And it was going to be an automatic forfeit loss unless he could get back in the ring. And I said, I'm willing to fight any hour you come back. And Dave and his crew all said they were willing to hold the fight as long as they were still at the venue. So I think they came back around midnight, and there were about 30 builders or so there at the time. And we held the match, and he was getting the better hand of me for a while because my wedge was a little bit crooked, and so only one point touched the ground.
Oh, okay.
And so he was able to get underneath my wedge, and then the spinner was overhead him for a while until I got that one point of the wedge I realized on the ground. I was able to get underneath them and then tear some panels off and cut off some titanium and then cut through it. I think like his receiver wire got cut into or something like that.
Yeah.
It knocked it off. So that was pretty cool.
Sounds like he got a bit of a thrashing.
Yeah. That was my good introduction to the bigger weight classes. So that was my first heavyweight, and that really got me hooked. And it got me some notoriety with some of the older and bigger builders who
Yeah, I bet.
didn't know me before, so I got to really meet them. And I think there's a good bit of mutual respect for when you build a 220-pound robot back then. And it was a smaller group, and so you had to sort of work together, and you would trade stories and information, obviously.
Yeah.
And, so I think it got me a lot of FaceTime with people like Ray and Matt and Wendy and John Ladnick and all these builders who were really active in the heavyweight community that I looked up to.
So
And
kind
I get a
of,
lot
it got you into that elite group.
Yeah, so I wasn't really into the elite group, but I got me friends with them at least.
Yeah.
They knew my name a little bit, and then I was able to get to know them more over time.
That's really cool. So, in trying to find out what you'd been up to before BattleBots, I was a bit of a BattleBots newbie, I guess. I didn't really know about the old BattleBots stuff. There's just this massive gap until the comeback. So what were you up to?
I would say, number one, I live on the East Coast in the U.S., and there are no events over here for big robots.
Okay.
I mean, there's zero, right, since 2004 or 5 or so.
Yeah.
And so when I would travel, it had to be for Robo Games or Combots Cup.
Yeah.
So I was always at the mercy of them holding an event, number one. And then two is I'm in college and a student, so me having the money to fly and ship the robot out, which the travel costs at the time were almost always more money than the entire robot builds I did ever.
Yeah, I bet, actually, yeah.
And so when you ship a robot across the country with 1,000 pounds of stuff and then your airfare for myself, and usually I'd have like one teammate sort of go, and then get a hotel for anywhere from 3 to 7 days, that really adds up fast.
Okay.
And but I did compete in those. So there was several, basically Brutality fought, and they had about 3 different versions of the robot that looked the same.
Yeah.
But it competed in the Combots Cup in around 09 or 2010, something in that range.
Okay.
I competed in Robo Games over the years. So 2007, I got second. I lost to Original Sin in the finals with that the second version of Brutality. And so just competed a few times. Then other times I would travel over there to volunteer to help out at the event. And then in 2008 and 2009, I spent a lot of time working on a different robot competition. That was for the NASA Centennial Challenges, because they had a $500,000 first prize.
Okay.
And so I devoted a major portion of my life to that.
Yeah, I mean, that would make you sit up, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So I competed in that, ended up with my team building the winning robot the second year for 2009.
Oh, wow.
And so that was pretty fantastic and useful.
Yeah,
and
I bet.
then after that, there was the BattleBots 09 event, which was the one that was filmed and never aired. And we did build the robot, another version of Brutality for that, and it ended up winning the event. So I wouldn't say I was dormant or anything. It's just, I think Robot Combat became a little bit quieter for people that lived on the East Coast at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
When I moved out, I finished college in 2012, and I moved out to the West Coast, and I became busy with startup job stuff, and then burnt out from it and doing my own things and other projects.
Yeah, so I guess that makes sense. And then, so were you pretty much off bot stuff until BattleBots came back around then?
No, I really never stopped doing bot
okay.
stuff. I think just different kinds of events and different competitions. And I really enjoy the big robots. And the little robots are sort of fun to design, and I wish someday I could have one again. But whenever I think about it, they're just too boring compared to the big ones.
Yeah.
And so unless there's the proper venue and opportunity for me to build one, it doesn't work out. And at some point, so I don't have like a normal day job. I just do my own sort of consulting and contracting work. When competing in, say, Robo Games becomes too expensive for me to build a whole new robot, I had to really wait until it would be a time that I could get more sponsors and more out of it than I put in.
Yeah.
So if I just kept competing, I think all my money would be gone very quickly.
No, definitely. Yeah.
So it's just that I didn't step away from robots, just that I didn't have anything new to build in a while.
Yeah.
So I guess from an outside perspective, you could say that I hadn't built any BattleBot that was new or big in years. You're correct.
Yeah.
I guess I never looked at it in that way, though. I still kept thinking about robots. I would meet with BattleBot builders who were my friends. I would see the events and go to Robo Games when I was in town and all that sort of stuff.
So how did getting an invite for season 1 come about?
Okay, so I guess no one ever would really have the proper answer unless you ask Greg, and I know you've had him on the show.
Yeah.
I don't know did he answer this question or not?
We haven't really spoken about season 1, to be honest.
But I think the reality is that they had very limited time, and they had one shot to make it really good.
Yeah.
And so, of course, in Greg and Trey's interest, they're going to hand cherry pick a curated list of people that, number one, they know can build something quickly and come through with it. So like reliability as like a number one metric. And then number two, that they're going to be interesting and build something cool and all that kind of stuff. And three, that they're going to put up with all the crap of the unknowns and the fact that the rules are being worked on and the contracts are going to take months to negotiate, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think pretty much everyone they knew very well or had worked with in multiple capacities before. And so I was a little bit more unknown to them in the BattleBots TV sense. But over the years, we've worked on projects together. I've done some, way back in the day, some private corporate shows at BattleBots where they'd have a big party and they'd set up a little mini arena, when we'd fight with things.
Yeah.
That idea of the putting on a showmanship event, and so you're more than just competing. And then they had seen me from BattleBots IQ and the 09 event, of course.
And obviously your hardest working team award.
Yeah, of course. They knew me from when I was a kid. They knew that I must have. But, no, so they knew me well, and I would see Greg out here every few months through where I was working at the time, and a few years ago was at Double Robotics, where Mark DeWitt's, the Ice Wave builder, where he works. And sometimes Greg would come down and they would do jam sessions or talk some business things. And so I was always on their radar, I think. And so we submitted a robot that actually looked a lot like what Jerome Miles built for season 2, his Red Devil robot.
Okay.
Our robot looked almost identical to it in some ways.
I guess it would, yeah.
And they didn't accept it. And they, I don't know the reasoning why. It had tank treads, it had arms, it was trying to fit to what they were saying was they didn't want the traditional stuff. So they told me flat out, we don't want a bar spinner, we don't want a drum spinner. And that was frustrating to me incredibly, as I wanted to be the Tombstone robot. I wanted to be the Mythical robot. So I submitted a design like that casually first, and they were like, no, we've seen too many like that. So I was sort of flat out told no, to which I understand was a business tactic in hindsight to try to get better and cooler robots.
Yeah.
And what I really know what that means in later on was that they wanted those robots, but they already had them sort of picked out in their mind as which ones they were going to be.
Mm-hmm. So Tombstone
so saying they didn't want that was just a way of saying we don't want another one of those.
Yeah.
And so I ended up building the version of Byte Force 1 that you saw because I wanted something that looked cool like a toy, and it looks like a machine that when people picture a BattleBot, it actually looks like they see it and they get what it does, and it makes sense. It's very hard to explain a spinning weapon to a random person at the street or at a fair. What it actually does. It's amazingly difficult concept to understand, storing up energy in some disc or tooth.
Especially like a drum, I guess. Yeah, a bar kind of makes more sense.
People just don't get it. And it's hard for us to understand why they don't get it. But you're talking to, there's 8 billion people in the world, and most of them just don't get it. And so when they finally told me as an alternate, it was the really bittersweet emotion of, I'm glad I was selected, number one, and that I was initially emailed this concept, which was pretty secret. And then two is that, man, this sucks that I'm not in it for so many reasons.
Was there ever any doubt that you'd go, or? So
it ended up being that about 3 weeks out was the way. So I kept working on the design 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And my design, so I spent all my effort on doing as much design as possible to make the robot be able to be built as quickly and honestly cheaply as possible.
Yeah.
So what I did was about 3 or 4 weeks out, I bought a few of the components which I knew were the riskiest and hardest to get, and that would be, I used one of the Aptyx Dynamics industrial gearboxes for the lifter, and so I got those on eBay, so I got them super cheap, with a make offer thing, and then I got a whole bunch of lengths of the attachment chain, again from eBay with these make offer situation, and I had acquired all that sort of stuff, and everything else was going to be aluminum or steel plate that could be water jet cut or laser cut very quickly and welded together. And that was sort of my method. I reduced the number of needed CNC components in the entire robot to just 3. And that was all for the tank treads, basically. And then a few more components which could be CNC'd to save a lot of weight and make things better. And only a few manually milled parts. And so I had the design preset to a point where I could build it very quickly. And I built some things quickly, but this was going to be a challenge. I think 3 weeks out is when I decided, and I said with my teammates, like, hey, look, I'm just going to go for it, because every day or so, I get the call from Greg. He'd say, hey, I really think someone's going to drop out. Today's the day. And of course, I know the business tactic is that he wants to do that because he wants backup robots.
Yeah.
But he can't say it. So, of course, that helped spur me on to keep going. So 3 weeks out, I decided, screw it, I'm going for it. And I'm taking the financial risk of buying all the parts and getting building, because if I wait another day, I won't be able to build it on time. So the worst thing that could possibly happen to me would be the day before the event, they're like, yeah, we're ready for you. And I say, well, I didn't start building it because I didn't think I'd get in, so therefore I can't do it. So that would have been the worst feeling to me than if I had built it and not gotten in.
Yeah. What sort of, you say financial risk, what sort of cost did the whole of Byte Force run you?
It's hard to say. I mean, the robot costs specifically were probably, in the end, in the $15,000 range at most. But maybe more like in around $5,000 or $10,000 of initial stuff of just sort of taking the plunge.
Yeah.
So that first $5,000 or $10,000 would get things that were the whole robot, and then maybe $5,000 more for spare.
Yeah.
It's just that most of that, though, is able to be recouped, right? So if I'm buying motors and gearboxes, that's okay. It's an investment. I can use them in the future. I can sell them.
Yeah, someone's always going to buy them, right?
Yeah, so $5,000 of that, though, would be like immediately sunk cost. That'd be like custom cut metal and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what I did was, that's where I worked with some of the local sponsors. So like Big Blue Saw is a water jet company. They're not local to me, but they're sort of local in the sense that they're very fast for every builder. So you can upload the parts and get them cut right away. And so Simon's, the owner, is a BattleBot builder himself. And so he gets it. Those kind of companies, they understand. And so in terms of time-wise, they understand that, hey, if I'm ready to hit buy on these parts, I need them like tomorrow. I need them yesterday.
Yeah.
And so doing that helped the financially and some of the risks. So some of those companies were able to donate some time and help with the materials, offsetting the cost, and reduce that risk to me. And then my university was another sponsor, which WPI has supported me from sort of day one in my robot building. And having them, they bought in sort of early on, saying, we know it's a risk, we're in either way. We like what you do, because they knew that even if something didn't go right with the show, we could make a good example of the robot through other methods, like demonstrating it to students or doing presentations and talking about it. So having a couple of, and then my dad actually sort of, I called him and told him what I was situation I'm in. He said he would put in a few thousand as like a upfront thing as a risk in case it didn't work out. And so that having the buy-in from sort of some early sponsors and my university and my parents made it pretty easy to sort of go forward with it.
That's awesome.
And then I think about 9 days out from the event that I got the official real call that said you're in, to which was great for me, but also was like, okay, nothing changes because I've been in go mode.
Yeah.
Whole time. But that they I have my teammates make sure they could take off work and come down to the event and that kind of thing. So a couple of my teammates, so one of them, Corey, some of them are fellow mentors on these first robotics high school teams. And so he and I both had a lot of free time during those few weeks. So we were sort of in between job things. So we were able to work on the manufacturing of the robot pretty much full time.
Yeah.
And without especially all my teammates there, but his help on the manufacturing side made that really helpful. So we were going to our day job from 9 to 5, and then getting tired and working on the robot at night. We were just sort of all out working on the robot.
Awesome. So you finished it. You got the call 9 days to go, and you nailed it. Were you pleased with the end result? Not the winning the season, but were you pleased with the robot once it was done?
I can't say I wasn't pleased with the result, obviously.
I don't think you could be more pleased.
I'm really proud of how the robot looks.
Yeah.
And it's really sort of interesting and fun to drive and sort of animate, I guess, probably the kind of things that the Warhead guys would talk about. That part was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Of course, I was very frustrated by the aspect of them wanting unusual, cool robots, but of course having the tombstones and the spinners in there. And so I told them all up front, like Trey and Greg, I'm going to have some big defensive wedge if there's big giant spinners in there.
Yeah.
And so it was bittersweet in the sense of sometimes I had to make the choice about going for the win versus putting on what I thought was the best possible show to put on.
Yeah.
So that's always a fine line to walk. And I felt I walked that appropriately in the sense of, if you give me that opportunity, I will demonstrate the whole robot. And if you put a big destructive thing in there, I'm going to have to play the bulldozer card. And other people, of course, you get a lot of heat from the internet about people calling witch force or whatever. And all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, don't worry about the internet.
So I wasn't pleased with that aspect of the robot. So I always want to win with a destructive, cool robot.
Yeah.
And so that part was a little bit frustrating that some people would look down on or not be great about it. But most people loved it. So it felt really good and cool.
Yeah.
I really like the design and building part of robots more than the actual having them and competing with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely kind of two sides of the fence that you sit on with that. Some people are like that, and then some people just love the actual competing.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy many aspects of the competing. I don't mind driving the matches. I love repairing the robots, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The adrenaline and time rush. But I certainly there's a point in every design and build where I get bored of the design because I've been staring at it for weeks or months.
I bet, yeah.
And I think that happens with people in their jobs too. If you're working on refining or optimizing something, there's a point where you hit your plateau of what you can optimize, and instead you think of things you should have done differently 1 or 2 months ago. And for me, that frustrates me.
Yeah.
And so when I see the robot and I'm going down the path and I see something I don't love, and I'm like, man, if I just did this thing from the start, it would have made everything else twice as easy. So that's why I probably change robots a lot and build new robots.
And we'll talk about pretty major changes for season 2. We'll talk about that in a second. But should we just go through the fights in season 1 quickly?
Yeah, sure. We're going to quick.
So you had the Warhead fight, which was awesome.
So Warhead was really exciting. I had never met Ian and Simon and their whole team.
Yeah.
And it was certainly an honor because it's one of my top 5 robots of all time of Warhead. And especially watching it as a kid, and it was so incredibly much more cool than the other robots back in its day. And but I felt that we could handle it in terms of beating it. So I was also a little bit excited in the sense that there were a lot of robots out there that I really didn't want to face, and there were some that I would love to have faced. And instead, I got someone in the middle, and that was like, okay, that's lucky enough. And
it was that fight when Warhead kind of hit you and then went straight up in the air, right? And you get that amazing shot, the slow-mo shot.
That's an example of no matter how powerful or good your spinning weapon is, and the same thing for Tombstone or the next Tombstone, it's hard to cut into an angled wedge surface.
Yeah,
I mean that's just the more energy, the more power doesn't help you cut in more. It just might bounce you off more. And so at some point, it's not very strategic. The strategy is just keep your wedge aimed at them, right?
Yeah. And
so at that point, it just becomes who is a better, luckier builder at every little screw and wire being held down. And then we're all using the same components. We're all soldering things well. We're all we're all taping things down. So at some point, it's a big coin toss.
Well, it ended up being you, though, at least.
Yeah. So in reality, of course, I'd rather have the wedge than a spinner. If those are the two options I have to get the win. So I was just glad that it worked out well and the robot drove well. I only driven the robot for about a 1 minute total in the entire lifetime before that match.
Yeah.
So we finished the robot without sleeping for days and weeks before the event. Put it in my garage on the floor, drove it for about 30 seconds, put it in our car, immediately drove to the event. That was the most sleep I got while my teammate Tina, she drove. I slept in the car, and then finishing the robot at the event, and then most of our test driving was in the practice box.
Yeah.
So seeing the robot actually move and work, and then doing that little maneuver with the lifting forks was really cool.
Oh yeah, that was lifting them up and then twirling them around a bit, right?
Yeah. And I was very worried about facing them because their weapon is powerful enough that if it hits anywhere that's not the wedge, it will seriously damage things. So it could take out the treads or the side plates very easily. And so I was very concerned by that. It's just that my robot drives pretty slowly. I'm geared a lot slower than most of the other competitors. And so it drives pretty straight, and it had the little tiny bit of magnet force, which was very, very little, very minimal at that event because I had no time to tune it or test with it, and I didn't want to spend extra hundreds of dollars on even bigger magnets. So it was minimal, but it added a little bit. And having the nice slow drivetrain and the wedge out there made it drive very nicely. So it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, that's cool. So then you had Hypershock, which was it kind of killed itself, didn't it?
Yeah, that's your favorite Will Bells there. And I've known Will for a while, and he even was interning out at Double Robotics. That's the one that Mark DeWitz owns, in one of the summers before, and I got to know Will better during that summer. And so he's a really good builder, obviously. And he had the robot in there, which is sort of like the design I would have chosen. Because I think it's a better design for both destroying and winning matches. So I was not really excited to face him in that match. And the problem was, after the Warhead match, although our robot looked like it was totally fine, the wedge got pretty mangled up on the attachments and the mounting to the frame, because the robot was built to be underweight originally, because we hadn't finished the robot, of course. You couldn't show up to the event and have it be overweight, you'd be screwed. So I built the wedge to be underweight on purpose, and it got all twisted and mangled in how it touched the frame. So from our Warhead fight, and the time between that fight to our second fight, was the biggest gap between fights at the event, and with it being round one and all. And so I had my teammate Travis and I sort of took our robot CAD in the hotel room and used every single pound and ounce we had to make that wedge stronger. And we had a local company, which is the same one we used to construct the original one. It was called Seaport Stainless. They were like about 45 minutes from the event. Had them laser cut another one for us the next morning. And my parents drove out and picked it up and brought it back. And I had the Lincoln Electric welding guys work on that for hours and hours. And that match against Hypershock is the early stage of the same wedge, which you will later on see against Tombstone.
Yeah. So this is we thought that you'd had one made there.
Well, it was sort of made there. It was made after the event started, after Fight 1. And so we took that design that CAD we already had, of course, and just, like I said, strengthened everything, and then made use the extra weight we had to really strengthen where it had damaged in the first fight. And then I preemptively had talked to the laser cutting company, and I talked to the Lincoln Electric guys. They were really great, Lon and Scott. They ended up spending about over 12 hours working on our robot, I feel like, at the event. And we made sure to talk to them about it in advance, like, hey, do you think you guys would have time to do this? If we came in here tomorrow at like 8 a.m., would you come in and just work on it? And they were like, sure, no problem. Awesome. So if you talk to them and you give them a lot of coffee and cookies and stuff, they were really helpful and really into it. And so they wanted the builders to succeed. And so they were saying, as long as, it doesn't get in the way of anything else, and, like, sure. So whenever they would work on it a while, and then someone else did the job, they'd work on their job, and then they would be like, okay, we'll go back to it.
Cool.
So it's a lot of welding. It's about 45 pounds of steel for just that wedge there. So the fight, though, was very scary because they have a good robot. I was worried they were going to sharpen their forks, and they didn't. So I was able to get underneath them with the wedge a lot. And then, of course, they got that one nice good hit in where it flipped me up in the air and onto my back. And because we had not fought with this robot before, I made a small change in the CAD, and the lifting forks were about an inch shorter, so it couldn't flip itself back over. And the robot was sort of hitting on this bar on top of the robot. And so, of course, we found that out in the arena. It's a bad time to figure that out. And the one you watch in frame by frame, and I've rewatched this before, it's really cool. It's right when they drive by, our lifting fork is able to push off the top of their robot to then flip ourselves back over. And so it's because they sort of drove by and kept the fight going for the entertainment TV purposes that we were able to do that. So Will's a great sport for being a good showmanship builder. And so that was pretty cool. To be able to come back from flipping over is always fun for the audience.
It was probably just sleep deprivation that caused a lack of judgment on his part, really.
No, I think not necessarily lack of judgment, because I've done the same thing with robots that are destroyed and keep playing with them. It's a TV show for fun too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that we do for fun. And if you're not trying to do something that is going to destroy your robot, but if you might drive by and push them around a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he must also not know that you can't get back over.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think he could tell from that.
Yeah,
I think I don't know. I have a
Maybe.
lot of awareness within a match. I know some builders say they get really they lose all their focus or zoned out. I'm focused in, but I'm aware if they can't flip over. And I have my
Yeah.
teammates next to me, so I've got Travis specifically yelling in my ear something like, "He cannot flip over." He cannot flip over.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I got it.
Okay, cool. Right, so then eventually he smoked up, didn't he? And then ended up...
Yeah, so it ended up being a clean knockout, which is always fun because I think you could win a judge's decision always. And if they have a spinning weapon and it flips you over, then that's not going to go well. So it's always great to get a knockout, even if it's through their own sort of engineering fault. It's just that we all have time to design those things from the start. And the night before that match, I went up to Will and Tyler and their whole team, and I felt their drivetrain, and I said, "Man, that is a lot of friction in your turning your wheels." And he says, "Yeah, I know. I think he said like he had some manufacturing errors, and some of the belts were a lot tighter than they wanted, and they were burning out speed controllers." And that's why I came over there, and I sort of was thinking, well, I guess I understand why, and they weren't able to really fix that at the event because I wanted to lend them any speed controllers if they needed it.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was like, if you put in more controllers, you're going to be burning up here. So they were geared faster than me by about double.
Yeah.
And then also had way more friction. And so it was one of those things where I felt that it was like a 1 + 1 = 2 situation.
Yeah. So after that, you had Overhaul.
Yeah, that was a really cool match. I've known Charles for years. Always read stuff, and we used to go to the Northeast events when I lived in Massachusetts and New Jersey together. And we both had built little robots for years.
Yeah.
One thing I was really excited about was how it was the first time I could use the full design version of Byte Force with the
Oh, yeah, of
lifting
course, yeah. Because you just had the little prongs until then.
Yeah, and also between this match after Hypershock, or maybe it was right before Hypershock, we had a major problem in the pits that was not shown on TV, which we thought was going to show, where we were using these motor controllers that were not all the Vex ones at the time. And I don't know if I want to mention this company, but they were horrible speed controllers. Okay. And that's the reason why I love the Vex ones so much and use them, and they're one of my sponsors also. But we were using another controller that was a little bit more cost savings, and on paper could do everything right.
We won't name any companies.
But these were these red controllers that I do not recommend using. And
we won't name any companies.
And so the whole robot was shorting out electrically, and we could not deduce what it was very quickly and easily because we were unplugging every single output out of all of the controllers, and it would still be shorting out.
Yeah.
And it came to the point where, Greg and Trey and all the BattleBots side and the ABC side are like, "Are you guys not working? Are you guys having a problem? We got an alternate ready to go. We're gonna get rid of you right away." And so that felt like a theme of that entire thing. Yeah. And the reason it was there was because we were one of the last first fights, and everyone else before us had hours of delays. Some robots they would go into the arena, they couldn't get going for 2, 3, 4 hours.
Oh God!
So our first fight, we went in, it worked. They were loving it. Okay, thank God. Two teams know what they're doing basically. And then, so for our second fight, we were all ready to go. Everyone else has delays again, and we were right before our final test is when this problem developed. Right before our fight, and so we brought it out back, and I keep telling them, "Look, we can get it ready. We got no problem. We got it." And I'm, of course, I'm sweating bullets, and my teammates and I are running around grabbing parts. And I got basically Travis and Corey and JJ and Tina were all opening the robot up, and I would be running back and forth to the pit to get tools and parts. So I knew where they were, and get back to the team. And I would come up with a new idea, and they would be trying something. And then one of the times I ran back, I was like, I think it could be the BEC circuit inside one of these controllers has shorted out, because the only place they were connected was through the receiver. Okay. And so we hadn't thought of that. That would be on the low power side. That would be causing the short, because it only was when you were turning on the high side master power that it would be showing the short. And so we were able to figure out one controller had shorted out its BEC, and we pulled it out, put a new one in, and got that match. So that was super tense. So once the match started, I was like very nervous and like super relieved to get into the box, but like really frazzled.
Yeah.
And that match against Overhaul though was a great match. It was tough in the back and forth sense, and it never feels good when you're driving in a match where you're sort of equaled, because you feel like you're always at a chance of losing. But I had enough going for it. So it's sort of one of those things where 2/3 of it went my way and 1/3 went their way.
Yeah, definitely.
And then there was a big thing with the judges coming in because they didn't do that a lot or often in the entire event.
Yeah.
But they all came into the arena to look at the damage, and they were in there for a long time.
It's a weird one because, I mean, I can't imagine there'd be much damage on either, really.
Well, that's what they wanted to check. So they got one good grab in with their, it was supposed to be a crushing weapon, right?
Yeah.
And of course, though, they could make it a grab or a crusher or whatever. And so because they got one big grab in and the match was close, I think they felt that if they saw that my drivetrain was somehow damaged a lot, like or looked precarious, that would give them an edge. And I'm not really sure, but maybe it was an excuse for them to try out that method of looking at the damage.
Yeah,
but it was
maybe.
Seeing Jessica Choba was in her dress and high heels in the arena, like on her hands and knees with like a bare skin, with the steel bits and all the damage.
Oh yeah, that was a bit.
That was really funny perspective we had from the driver's stand. And
you wouldn't want to go in there after Tombstone had been about, would you?
no, I would never want to put my hands in the ground. There's a lot of steel. So that was pretty cool to see them go through there. And I think so. After every match, one thing they don't show, because I had several drivetrain problems you saw throughout the event. Intermittent, in a few seconds, would get stuck and come back. I would always demonstrate that my robot could like drive back to my arena square and move the weapon around, and you do that as one method to show the judges everything's operational.
Yeah.
So at the end of that match, I think they had got me on my side right at the buzzer. And as soon as the buzzer went off, I was able to flip back over and drive right back. And I think that helped them. But on the TV editing side, they show it like, oh, you're stuck up on the sidewall, and they left you there. So a little bit of drama. But it was a very close match. I was very glad to get the win, especially my sponsor, Worcester Polytech Institute, is a rival of MIT.
Oh, okay.
They would be eating it up and loving it. So I was excited to call them and say, yeah, we beat the MIT kids, or whatever they're going to call them on TV.
And then you had what was left of Ghost Raptor.
Yeah, that was a really fun one. So I think at this point in the event, I remember you'd go home to the hotel, and it was like, oh my God, we've made it to, I guess that was like the quarterfinals?
No, semifinals, that was. Ghost Raptor and then Tombstone. So
yeah, final
semifinals.
4 robots. Yeah, so that was the final 4. So before, I remember before that match, when there was the 4 robots left, I got do a prize money point of like financial relief and sort of being like, oh my God, we've actually made it this far. The robot has like paid for itself basically.
Okay.
And we're going to get matches on TV. Like, this is incredible. You know, it was all of we've actually done it. So I had this major sense of relief. That was all the time we had put in of all my teammates and sponsors over months had really paid off. And so that was really exciting. And the fact that I was confident I'd be able to use the normal gripping mode, which was really exciting and fun, because it also Trey and Greg had told me things like, you know, Greg would say, don't put the wedge on. You know, like he would just whisper in my ear very emphatically, like, we don't want the wedge, you know? And neither did I. But if he's going to put a big spinner in there, I've got to use it. And I had never faced, I guess I did face Chuck once before. Yeah. I faced him with Brutality once, and one, but his robot had been damaged.
Seems like a bit of a theme is occurring with young Chuck.
And, well, his robot had been damaged. He did get it back to the same state. So that match was really exciting because a lot of builders, I think, were finally, for that match, rooting for me. And I think up until that point, they were rooting for themselves or their other things.
Yeah.
But then with the final 4 robots, a lot of them would come up to me and say, like, we really want you to beat Chuck. We really want you to destroy Ghost Raptor. We really want you to beat Ghost Raptor. And that felt good. That was really good feeling that people were, you know, people that I really liked and respected were coming up privately and telling me that. So that was the first match where everything worked really well. And it's the match that I show people when I explain what the heck I built. I show them the Ghost Raptor match, and it shows someone being lifted up, being flipped over, you know, being carried around. So that was just really cool. it was a great match.
Definitely. And then, I mean, you're through to the final. How does that feel?
Oh, it felt amazing. I mean, it felt so good. And this is a long time ago, right? This is a year and a half ago that this occurred. But it still felt really good. I'm sort of getting like goosebumps remembering what it felt like. And I faced Ray multiple times before.
Okay.
And it's not fun. And normally when I face him, though, I have Brutality. So I had a big spinning weapon and a wedge on the front of Brutality.
Yeah.
Brutality's wedge was thicker and the weapon was bigger.
Okay.
So I would have rather have had Brutality to face.
So when Brutality, so this would have been against Last Rites.
Yeah, so Brutality faced Last Rites in 06.
Okay.
I beat him in 06 before fighting Biohazard. And so I cut through. I think I knocked off one of their wheels or something, and I cut through their battery compartment.
Oh wow!
Shot, and then that worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
And then in 07 is when I fought Last Rites Ray with Brutality, and we broke a hole in the arena, and it was pretty scary. They had to stop the match, and they did a judge's decision based on the match up to that point and gave me the win. Where my robot had shown lots of aggressive and control of the hits, even though my blade broke. My blade breaking off is what like actually broke the hole, sort of.
So really, you opened up a gateway to hell. So I mean, you deserve the match.
Nobody
surely.
was injured. It was a freak occurrence where the blade broke off and hit a portion of the arena frame, which compressed down vertically on top of a sheet of polycarbonate.
Okay.
Sort of freak set of occurrences that I think they made sure to then I've never used that method again, and they have a much better arena now.
Yeah.
But that was some of our history was pretty cool in that sense.
Okay. So you've had some eventful fights with Ray.
Yeah, so we have a lot of power. So this one though, of course, so I know the power of their weapon, and it's obviously terrifying.
Yeah.
And so for this match, it's all just we've got the wedge now welded up like a tank, and literally between every match, the Lincoln Electric guys would be welding on more poundage of steel and every little bits we can get and give it to them. And we've streamlined the rest of it, so now we can flip back over, if we need to, unlike the Hypershock situation. And everything is just buttoned down. The only problem we couldn't shake was that throughout the entire event, we were using a gearbox, which I also won't name, that I did not like. But I used because it was cheap and easy to use. There was some part inside which kept shifting and locking it up for a few seconds.
Okay.
And there was nothing we could do at the event to properly diagnose what was going wrong.
Yeah.
We would tear it open and we would look at it, and there's nothing obviously wrong. And there must have been some intermittent binding or some speck of material would get caught somewhere.
Okay.
And so that was always a little frightening. And it ended up happening for a couple, about, between 1 to 5 seconds in almost every one of our matches.
Oh.
And that's what happened against the Tombstone fight. But then it shakes free by just mechanical force, and the 4.5 horsepower of the mag motor is just sort of blast through whatever is jamming up there. So the match starts up, and it's all about keeping the wedge pointed at Tombstone.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy from a strategy sense. And I understand that. I know from the past that Ray's robot is very hard to drive. And I never want to phrase it as he's a bad driver, because he's not. He's a very good driver. I've seen him drive other robots as well. But Tombstone itself, being 2-wheel drive with a massive spinning weapon and all that, and recoil and gyro forces, is hard to drive. And so knowing that, you're able to take advantage of that by keeping the wedge aimed at their weapon and then following up with pushing them to the wall or having them hit the wall before they hit you. So that part is nice. And then it's all about the luck of making sure they don't catch you at a bad spot, and it worked out in our favor, I guess, and that was pretty cool. We didn't know, of course, that we won after the match, because we could tell, and I know from judging, I've judged my events myself, how important using your weapon is. But the fact is, we were able to demonstrate lifting them around too with our weapon sometimes. And it's sort of one of those things where at some point, if the match kept going on, you could imagine what also would happen as part of I think that goes into judging that people don't realize. So you're fighting, you go on, and then you imagine okay, at this point, this weapon has been disabled, this one still works, this robot still works fine. So it was obviously a very close decision, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I think they went for the survival aspect there.
And then, how did it feel coming in as the alternate that you were, and then putting all that, just risking it all to build this robot in the first place? How did it feel to then?
Oh, it felt incredible. I was really especially between and behind on sort of job things in between stuff.
Yeah.
And so I took a sort of big financial risk and time risk in putting so much effort into the BattleBots thing.
Yeah.
And having it pay off in the literal sense of making some money and getting recognition for my sponsors and for my teammates and all that was just so cool. And knowing that BattleBot's such a big part of my life, and all of my friends and family know that. And so they know me as like a robot guy. And so to be able to have something that they could see on TV and show to their friends and stuff was really exciting. I've won events before, but winning the BattleBots one that I knew would be filmed on ABC was just huge. And you could tell from the production levels of the event how professional they were and how good they were making it look and feel, and with the lights and sound and the image quality. So and knowing that it was the season 1 aspect made it exponentially better, because I know they're going to resell that season internationally and have it showing around. So it was just so cool.
Yeah, you've only just been crowned champion over here.
Yeah. Oh, they're replaying it right now?
Yeah, finished. It was the one before our interview with Ray, right?
Okay. So I'm ready for a bunch of influx of English speaking.
Well,
the British,
I guess. Have you had any more
British
Facebook
slang fans are going to come in?
Any more Facebook likes from British people?
Yeah, you always see it come in waves, basically, different countries.
So, season 1, awesome job.
Thank you.
But then you decide, I could have done way better than this. I'm going to make all these changes.
Yeah, so a lot of people gave me crap after the event for using a wedge and for that kind of thing. And they're like, why would you build this robot? That kind of stuff.
Which was never your intention.
No, which was never my intention. And so I took it as, okay, so irrelevant to what you say, I'm going to try and build the thing I wanted to, which is the Byte Force version 2 you saw in season 2. I knew that BattleBots still wouldn't love it, because I know there's going to be other designs like that. So actually my teammates and I kept it completely secret from other builders and from BattleBots, because we didn't want anyone to get wind over to ABC and BattleBots that we were planning on not bringing back their champion robot.
Yeah.
And so we submitted a design completely like everyone else on the last possible day to submit our new video and pictures of the robot and design. And we pitched it as, Byte Force last year was cool. It won, that's good. Yeah. But we like destruction. We want to build a new robot. That was our theme. And so we stuffed a big, powerful weapon motor in there, and a lot of reliability, though. So we had, the 4-wheel drive, the good mag motor drivetrain, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Conservative in some senses, because the vertical spinning weapon, you don't need as much energy stored as you do in a horizontal to do the same damage. And so, but it also would look cool. And we actually submitted a different name that was a variation of Byte Force. I don't know if I want to say it here, because I don't want to give it up in case we use it in the future. But to designate that it was a new robot, but it had the same theme. And you could tell that
was it Chomp Force?
No. Our first robot, though, was supposed to be called Chompy. Actually, it was the first one. Not Chomp. Ours was going to be Chompy. And they didn't tell me that until a couple of weeks before the event. It was a little frustrating. And so the whole new robot was really exciting to me, because it's the one I wanted to have against every one of those opponents.
Yeah.
It has a stronger wedge, so we use better materials, and because it's shorter, it's less material to cover, so it's stiffer and stronger. So more wedge armor, but also the powerful spinning weapon both on all the time. And still the ability to change the front out with different forks and options and things. And then thematically, we tried to make it look like it came from the same team, of course, and some of the same engineering stylings.
Yeah, it's really, it looks like Byte Force.
Yeah.
Which is
so
cool.
We felt that it was okay, and they were okay with it. They said, we like it, it's cool, okay. And
you got a bit lucky there, where kind of your idea of Byte Force was cool, but we want to see destruction is kind of what they were thinking, right? With the active weapon
and so between that
rules
change
and all
of after season 1, they told us that there was going to be some changes to the active weapon or primary weapon, as they say on TV and the internet all the time. Those rules, and we know the same thing. We want to cause a knockout to get our win.
Yeah.
And we know that unless you're causing damage with your weapon, and unless you're being aggressive with your weapon, that it's going to get you a loss. So number one, we want to have our weapon all the time. Number two, we want to have the weapon in whatever we call the front of the robot.
Yeah.
Whatever we're pointing at the other opponent. And we also want to make it be reliable and strong and all that sort of stuff. And I've built vertical spinners before in the smaller robot weight class in a 12-pounder called Entertainment, and it worked really well. And it's actually what a lot of the Brazilians based their later robots off of. This was way back in like 2004 and 5.
Yeah. Just a quick question about your design of the new robot. Tires over tracks. Why?
Oh, of course, that's easy. So tracks are really just cool looking, and that is it.
Yeah.
Everything else about tracks is, as you guys would say, tracks are rubbish. So the tracks are just a horrible engineering choice. Of course, they're heavy. It was about 30 pounds with the track system. They're single point failure, so if you bend in the side or damage it, your whole drivetrain can be jammed up. They're hard to make. I actually had help from Mark DeWitz, the IceWave builder, for CNCing all those parts. So I went over to his shop, and he helped me CNC those parts. I stayed up, all night, 2 nights in a row, just changing out parts in the CNC mill for the tank treads. And then I had some students on our high school team assemble them all together. They were doing for all day with a drill and hand tools and things. So tracks are just horrible. But
so tracks are rubbish. But
new version, wheels, saves 30 pounds. The wheels get knocked off, you're still good. More traction because they have a better rubber compound.
Did you worry that you were going to lose some of the bite forciness of it by not having wheels on it? By not having tracks on it, sorry.
For them accepting me, I was a little worried. So we had some versions of the robot where stylistically it looked like there were still tracks. Like how you make a kid's toy connecting between the two black wheels. We put on some black chevron type of things.
It's like a kid's toy.
Yeah, and it's stylized would look cool, but we realized that we fit the style pretty well. Yeah. And it looked cool and engineering-wise, and it was a neat-looking machine. And so we felt we didn't need that. And we felt what made Bite Force was more of the reliability aspect and the sort of the attachments in front and that kind of thing. So we were okay with that. And they were okay with it too.
That's awesome.
And we pitched it as explaining how getting rid of the tracks is what enabled us to have a really destructive, powerful, cool weapon. Yeah. And so that's the trade-off, right? So that's 30 pounds into our weapon, which they're all about.
So season 2 overall, how did you feel with your performance?
Well, I mean, obviously a little let down overall.
Well,
we're shaking out new robot problems, basically.
Yeah.
So our first match against Mohawk, the weapon all worked fine, but we used these new rubber shock mounts, which a lot of builders use to attach wedges and things like that. Yeah. And we used them to attach these forks, and they sheared off within like 1 second. As soon as we drove underneath them as like a doorstop, they sheared off. And so without those little wedge forks, we couldn't even get underneath Mohawk, so you couldn't really hit them with the weapon. So it was like a really embarrassing thing of just chewing on their side, but not digging in. And so, but we certainly still, the judges couldn't tell that, and other builders could tell, but we were still obviously able to knock them out from just force and smashing into them quickly. Yeah. And then the second match against Ringmaster was our first real test of the weapon hitting, and I was very intimidated because Hal lives near me, and I saw his sort of build process. I knew how massive those steel and aluminum parts were. Yeah. Super thick billet parts, beautiful machining. Our team was a big fan of his engineering work.
Yeah, I think everyone loved how it looked.
Yeah. And so the engineer in me really likes those kind of robots and machines in general. And so getting those hits in there where we got to get him a few feet in the air and flying across the arena was great. Yeah. But then, of course, our third or fourth big hit, what happened was our own motor clutch was set a little bit too tightly, and so on a big impact our chain yanked on itself and it rotated the motor in its housing, cocked it like 10 degrees, which is not really supposed to be possible. Yeah. And so what ended up happening was that shock broke the magnets free inside the motor, which, as Kenny would say, jammed it up. And that was our first real big test, and it was easy to fix that problem in the sense that we set the clutch lighter and we, put a new motor in. And I guess that's probably when the producers caught us ordering a bunch of motors, and people were talking about order a bunch of E-Techs. And the reasoning there was that this was a Friday at about 2:30 p.m. when this match occurred. Yeah. And so I brought 2 of those motors to the event because I knew that other motors existed. The Death Roll team used the same motors. The Orion and Dan from the Rex team used the same motors, and Electric Boogaloo and Rex. And so they had multiple of those motors also. There's many of those motors that existed in the building. But of course, one of the things to be successful is to have your parts sort of ready to go. And so because it was Friday afternoon, it was easy for me to, as insurance, overnight, next day, Saturday delivery, a bunch of motors from Washington or Oregon, somewhere up there where this company was, and have them as insurance, because if your weapon breaks but you still win, you want to be able to replace it. And the cost of putting in a few $100 motor to when you've had 6 teammates working for months and taking off 10 days of work and hotels in LA for 10 days and all that stuff is nothing percentage-wise to if that was the only thing you needed to make yourself better.
Yeah, you hear that, so internet? Yeah.
But I don't care. They don't understand how that works. Where you can sell and return motors and parts. We bought and returned thousands of dollars of McMaster parts that we'd have on as insurance in our pit, just in case you need it. If you need that one tool or that one piece of material, you've got it. And if you don't, you're done.
Let's hope they're not listening, because they're going to cut you off, Paul.
I think one of my favorite tools, and I think other engineers would agree, is using something like a credit card or money as a tool. And so what it means is you spend appropriately. So there's a lot of things you can do that you can buy and return, or if you can buy and have as an insurance plan, it makes a lot of sense. And I think it goes with that saying that 2 is 1 and 1 is none. If you have one part that you need and it fails, then it's like it doesn't exist, because it'll fail at some point.
I feel like this is good advice. If you're applying for BattleBots, you need to be listening to this right now. Yeah.
My dad taught me that like 15 years ago when I was asking him, I didn't have any money as a kid, right? So I'm building a robot, and I was using like my pizza money that I made from working at a pizza place to build a robot. And so everything came from my parents, and I explained it as, okay, researched it, this is the right part, but it's really expensive. And at some point my dad he says, do you understand if I go to this event and take off, hotel for this many days and this much airfare and all this stuff, and you're talking about a couple $100 part, like being like the difference between like good and bad, is like, of course you should get the better part. There's some scale where something feels and is very expensive, but in the overall project or long run, it's horribly stupid to not spend the money on it. And so certainly that was a good thing instilled in me. Spend appropriately, but so in having motors that you can return or sell, have them on hand. Yeah, so with that Ringmaster fight went well. That's fine. And then the next fight against Chomp obviously did not go our way. No. And was sort of extremely frustrating in the sense that I think we had a great bracket. Chomp and win if faced Yeti or something like that. Like I liked that. I could handle those. Yeah. Those robots, that kind of thing. Yeah,
it was a good bracket. I mean, you wouldn't want to be in that Minotaur bracket.
Yeah, and exactly. And so although Chomp's weapon is very powerful, the rest of Chomp is very beatable for our robot in the sense that they're not floor scraping. And any robot that's not floor scraping is an easier robot to face than one that is. Yeah. And because they don't have a big spinning weapon that's always spinning up, their chance of hitting you is less likely than, say, a tombstone. Yeah. And so that's just a fact,
And if they jump on their side like they tend to, you might get
it. Yeah, we knew that the robot was unstable, and we talked about our strategy of being, we sort of can just go at them because, and it's the same thing that Yeti used, and you watch their fights identical to ours in the sense that they go at them, and then Chomp's hammer hits them on their weapon several times, right near their belt and that kind of stuff. But because when they fire, they're unstable because they had problems with the magnets in the arena floor and all that. It's an unstable robot. And so you sort of can go at it, and it looks like it goes your way. The only saving grace, of course, is that although it was our loss, it didn't look like a horrible fight.
It just looked unlucky.
Yeah, well, it's unlucky, but it's also the main goal of the point of their robot.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So they're good engineers. They're trying to build something to take out your weapon chain, and that's fine. They did a great job of that. Yeah. So some people call it, lucky for them or bad luck for us. The reality is, we know that there's some unprotected, unarmored areas of a robot.
Exactly.
And we made engineering trade-offs months in advance and even during the event, where it's not like we're sitting in the pits twiddling our thumbs. We're working on repairing and bettering everything else that we think is a higher priority at the time.
Yeah.
And for a part like that, we didn't come up with a good armor solution that we liked the implementation of and the look of and had the time to really implement well.
Yeah.
So at some point when you hit go and start manufacturing your parts, you cut off some doorways. And so we could have kludged something on that we really wouldn't have been proud of at the moment. And we would have had to do a lot of work in taking off some other parts. So our robot's reconfigurable in the sense that we add extra armor of various parts. You can't really see it from the outside. So like for that match, we doubled up aluminum armor plates over all the top sections, extra motor armor. There's 2 plates that go, one over the brush end of the motor, one over the can of the motor. I think only astute people would notice that kind of stuff. But we're adding on those parts and we're taking off, the wedge and fork components to get that.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of limited amount of what we can do after that we can pull off. So that's kudos to them for the what I call a good hit and good engineering.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's what they said they were going to do before,
Yeah.
so you can't really.
Well, I wouldn't say they got lucky. I'd say they did get lucky, but they were trying to get lucky. So that's the point.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're engineering to try and get a good lucky hit.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool.
That's great stuff. So, I mean, not the season 2 you would have hoped for, but definitely.
What I was really glad about, I felt good going home, was that we had the really good Rumble fight.
Of course.
Right, so tons of people had Rumble matches, and there were tons of great Rumble fights. And to be the one fight they chose that they put on TV was just so flattering and felt really good. We went sort of all out, and it was the first time that our weapon stayed working, and it showed what you can do when our weapon stays on the point of the robot, and it's tearing things up, and it's in control, and it's cool, and it showed us something else that was back over, which a lot of people questioned if that was possible.
Yeah.
That made me leave and go home with redemption.
Yeah.
And the fact that we got 4 fights shown with only 2 really aired fully was still great, because a lot of people got none.
Yeah, definitely.
Or 1. And I also do this as I make BattleBots into like a full-time job where I've got great sponsors and supporters that have been there for both years and for many years before that. And so being able to get them good airtime and good highlight stuff is also really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I love asking this question. I've decreed it that BattleBots Season 3 is, it's happening. What changes are you going to make to your robot?
Oh, I have no idea.
What the hell, man?
although I think about BattleBots all the time, I like to not waste time on it. So I don't get. Right now, I'm working on other projects, and that's where my mind is. So I've probably been put enough money and time into this machine that it would likely look or be very similar.
Yep.
With which could mean drastically rebuilt, but you wouldn't notice it. So it might be like a whole new frame, for example, that solves some of the issues and problems we had, which is like to get us a few more pounds, number one, for extra armor and variations. Might be a different weapon motor, so I could use more reliability. So I might have something like more smaller mag motors as opposed to one big E-Tech, which, and dual side of driving the weapon.
Yeah, bit of redundancy.
Dual chains or belts, so that so I would make changes that were based on purely reliability and small performance increase.
Okay.
So now as a test bench, I know I can go for a little more power in the weapon and still have the motors and batteries be okay.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
So a broadly similar looking robot.
Yeah. So we put a lot of time into machining a lot of cool components for that. Like the weapon is a giant. It started off as a 70-pound billet of S7 that we CNC milled, and Corey was going at that for a day, and we put a lot of time into some of those components. So it's like a 3-inch titanium hub that the weapon rides on, and those parts all turned out really well, and they're in great shape. So we'd like to reuse them if possible.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I am a bit sad we didn't get a major scoop like, oh, we're going to build a hammer for next series.
Well, just for you, I'll build a hammer for next year. It's going to be powered by a new method that no one's ever seen before.
Is it the nuclear reactor?
I can't say. It's not legal in all states yet, and
Have you been doing any other heavyweight events in the US or?
I haven't lately, and it's sad. It's because there's been big conflicting things where my fellow teammates are mentors for high school kids for First Robotics. We're mentors for Team 254, but their season is January through April every year, which the last 2 years has overlapped with BattleBots completely. And so that's been very frustrating, and that's also the time for robo games.
Oh,
and so
of course, yeah.
When you add in those two factors, it's made it tough so that I couldn't compete also at robo games.
Yeah.
I always want to compete at robo games and Robot Wars and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If the timing works out.
Yeah.
And like this last Robot Wars was announced with an even worse timeline.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for you all, and the timeline sucks. I still want to compete with something new for robo games, and what I want to do is use some of the parts I've acquired through the last couple of years in BattleBots. They have a lot of parts laying around.
Yeah.
And batteries and motors and things, and build something new.
That'd be really cool.
I would like to, and I hope that works out.
Have you any plans to return to the overhead spinner? Is Brutality still around?
I think no. So Brutality is still around. It's in my garage on the floor. It's like used as a table stand for other things. So there are some fundamental major flaws with that design, of which namely is it's hard to self-write. And so if you get upside down, of course, there's a chance you can self-write if using the motor and it spins over a certain way. Or you could add some very complex bar which rotates a spinner out of the way and flips itself over or something. But the point is that's a fundamental big flaw in that. Secondly, it's an expensive type of design to maintain because you really can eat through a lot of motors and batteries and parts quickly. And specifically for Brutality, I designed it around those G-Pack motors, which have been extinct for over 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
And at some point I had bought up the surplus market wherever I could find from other builders. And so I had enough to design the robot around it, like a dozen or something like that. But now there are some more motor options in the 3-inch range, like some of the new mag motors are coming out with actually that I think they're going to be announcing them later today that are more powerful in a certain size.
Okay.
But the point is, you're designing around a height restriction, which is very extreme.
Yeah.
So it drives a lot of the design to be very expensive. And the frame of Brutality itself is a welded aluminum frame, and it's got all sorts of little cracks developing and issues. So it would need a whole new frame to do anything.
Yeah.
And therefore, I don't want to build a whole new frame around like a bad starting technology or point. You know?
Yeah. So it'd be an entire redesign anyway.
I ran that robot for years, so I don't think I would use that same one.
Yeah.
But I have thought a lot about like putting it up for sale. Like, would anyone want it? Like, they could have all the parts in the frame. It's just that it doesn't work like it's not a ready to go, turn on the key and it's like going. It would take a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I don't feel that I'd want to buy it, but there must be someone out there that does. And I don't know if I should like offer it up or anything like that.
I don't know. I mean, if you're listening, get in touch with Paul.
It all exists. All the parts exist. I've got a lot of spares. It's just the frame has definitely got some cracks and some tweaks that I don't feel comfortable running it. But someone
I'm going to edit those bits out because, let's not say about the cracks.
It's like new. The robot only drove to the supermarket every Sunday.
Obviously, I'll be taking a 10% cut on that,
sure.
Paul. Yeah.
If you find a good buyer, you go for it.
Finder's fee. Right. Awesome. It's been really great having you on. I think there's only one question we haven't really touched on.
Sure.
So thanks for everyone who sent questions in. They've kind of shaped how we've gone with this interview rather than asking them all at the end. What's the biggest thing you learnt from building the new Bite Force?
Number one, I'll answer this in a couple of ways, but really the biggest thing was that BattleBots would accept it and that they were willing to let it be the Bite Force team and not the Bite Force robot.
Yeah.
So I was pretty terrified that they would say no, because if they said no, we didn't really submit the other design. So I was worried they would somehow say, "Oh, you didn't submit the old one. Sorry, like you're out." Who knows? Or that they didn't like that we used the wedge or something.
Yeah.
So I was very relieved when they actually said, "Yes, you can have it and build it."
Cool.
The next thing I think I learned was I think how helpful my teammates were for the last couple of years for this construction stuff. Because yeah, there were many years where I sort of had to do BattleBots stuff alone.
Yeah.
And then just by the nature of the time it takes and the money. Mm-hmm. And then the designs I've built lately for the heavyweights and 200-pound robots require sort of a gargantuan effort from sponsors and teammates.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really cool that they bought into it too, and that they were able to also put a lot of time and effort in. And so it's the kind of thing where I can, CNC mill some parts, but my teammate Corey does it 20 times faster than me and better. And sort of, I can come up with a design, but Travis looks at it and goes, "Oh, this is where you're being stupid. Just do this." And it's like, "Oh, okay." So there's definitely some aspects to my teammates that make it really good for this project.
You kind of learn that you can lean on your teammates a bit more than you have been.
Yeah, and it's good with having the new Bite-Force is a good example of that, because it was too big of a project to build from scratch with really cool looking. I tried to make a really polished looking finished product. So our robot's all powder coated and anodized, and it's got tons of CNC milled parts and the really cool details that probably only other builders would notice in the pits. But we put a lot of effort into I have a lot of pride in sort of that machine.
Now, you touched briefly on it, actually. Robot Wars. Have you seen much?
Saw little bits and pieces. So I especially saw a lot of the builders building the robots and following it on Facebook and Twitter and all that.
Yeah.
So I've looked at a lot of the machines, and I certainly watched like the final matches. I saw Apollo do its thing there, and I certainly saw a couple matches with Carbide, Cobalt, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, Carbide,
and certainly it's pretty cool. So yeah, well, I watched a little bit and got a little bit of a taste. And I certainly watched the old Robot Wars when I was younger.
Oh yeah, definitely. So your favorite Robot Wars robot from when you were younger or now?
Is this like where you say like Razor or Tornado and you cause like a storm on the internet?
No. It's really interesting. When we had Will Bells on and we spoke about his favorite, it was Thermidor.
I don't remember that one.
It's like a lobster.
I will admit. So one of the favorite robots I saw. So I really liked Razor. I really liked, of course, the engineering behind Razor, and I liked the fact that they made it work so well way back in the day. Yeah. With like 1999, 2000, 2001 technology. And I like the fact that they got it right sort of the first time. And I know they've made lots of refinements, but they got that 90% effort like right away. And that's probably what made it so good. I like that it was light years ahead in engineering performance over everyone else. No, I think the flippers and stuff are pretty cool. I do like a lot of the bigger spinner weapons, and I certainly like low and sleek and good engineering. And I think there's a different style for some of the British robots.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think my favorite Robot Wars robot was probably like, in reality, something like Kilohertz or Terahertz.
Oh yeah.
Really cool. I like the engineering. I liked watching John Reed's website when I was a kid and reading about. I think he put the most real engineering work into the robot and designing it and machining it and catting it out.
Yeah.
And I think that wasn't the normal theme for most of the UK robots, in my opinion.
I mean, you've mentioned sponsors all throughout. I feel like we're going to get a long list. So, do you want to reel them off?
Well, yeah, there's a few that I haven't mentioned. I guess the biggest, most helpful one has been Vex Robotics. And they're also the same company that makes, they're Innovation First International, made the Victor controllers, the IFI controllers, and also Hexbug, the toys.
Yeah.
So they're a big sponsor of my team, and I've used their parts for over 15 years. And then Worcester Polytech Institute, my university I went to, WPI, has been my single longest sponsor supporter of all of my projects. So they really get it. So that's a school where you do a lot of really building stuff and physical things in addition to all of the theoretical stuff.
Yeah.
They were able to give me lab space and tools, and that's how I learned to really use real machinery and actually build good parts. And then SolidWorks was sort of new for me this year, but I've used SolidWorks as a CAD design programming tool for over about 6 years now.
Okay.
And it's been super helpful for what I'm into, which is the real design and packaging of the robots and making a good product.
Yeah.
And I've used SolidWorks in business things too. And so it's really good to use that for both business and in robot hobby stuff. And then Big Blue Saw did all the water jet cutting for both years for our robot. So we have thick aluminum plates, and it's a big puzzle that goes together and gets welded up. And what's cool about Big Blue Saw is it's the only one where you upload your parts and hit, what does it cost, and hit a quote, and you get instant live feedback digitally. So there's none of this
That's the dream.
industrial company where behind the scenes you feel like you're getting shafted a little bit on some car salesman pricing.
Yeah.
It's not. Big Blue Saw says, here's what it costs if you get 1, here's what it costs if you get 10. If you change the material to 70-75 aluminum, you get a real update. Mm-hmm. So it's really cool. And they make the parts in days instead of weeks. And that's really helpful for building bots. Awesome. And then there was a local welding company, Applied Welding, and this guy doesn't have like a real website or anything. But if you're in sort of the Silicon Valley Bay Area, he is an amazing TIG welder. And so he's done all the aluminum. We're talking thick, like half-inch thick aluminum plate, 60-pound heat sink frame. And he's getting the full weld penetration and full strength welds. And he works like around the clock whenever you need him. He's a great guy.
Awesome. What's that name again? Sorry.
Applied Welding Technology.
Okay, because you said he doesn't have a website. I want to get him out there.
Well, Magmotor, of course, is the other one that's a big name in BattleBots. BattleBots community is that my drive motors have been mag motors basically, and they've been mag motors for years. And there are sort of some other knockoff companies that have copied some of the stylings, but the mag motors are the ones with the real quality, and that's what makes things basically make your robot look like it drives well.
Yeah,
is because of the mag motors. I can't believe how much you guys still use that, like that Bosch 750 motor and all that. No, I think that's all my sponsors.
Okay, cool. Well, it's been awesome having you on, Paul. Thanks for giving us so much of your time.
No, I had a great time. I've enjoyed your podcast, and I had it on in the background when I would be working on CAD design and other projects, and so it's cool. You guys make it fun, and I like your sense of humor and all that.
Cheers, man.
All right.
It's been awesome having you on, man. Cheers.
Okay, talk to you later.
Bye. Is anyone still there? It's been a long time.
Wake up!
Come on. No.
My God,
no, because what if someone has listened to it in bed?
No, because then they just woke up with a start.
Oh, that's so harsh.
Paul he's a lovely chap.
He's got a lot of robot history, and we've heard all of it now.
And it all started with the Legos.
From conception to present day.
And he's younger than I thought as well.
Don't say that.
What?
This is the same thing.
I was trying to work his age out as we go forward. He gives a lot of... If you're like a training investigator, there's a few good clues in there. So
okay,
I might have a little competition of guess his age without Googling it. So, Paul Ventimiglia, see if you listened. I'm not talking to Paul. I'm talking to the listeners.
Well, Paul could definitely guess his age.
He knows how old he is because hopefully he's kept track of it. So,
and if he hasn't, other people will have.
So that's an amazing show. And you know what? It's gone on long enough. So I think we need to wrap it up.
Awesome.
So
thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
We really want Matt Maxim.
We're going to gun for Matt.
As a guest, because he's going to be cool. We've got Simon next week.
Matt and Wendy, I have to say, we want.
Will you want Wendy?
Yeah, she's well in the poo pants.
Oh, okay.
He loves the poop pants.
That's cool. She's probably has to wash his clothes a lot after all of that modelling as well. So she knows the right washing powders to use. So I'm interested in that because I got a bit on me the other day.
I saw that, yeah.
Anyway, see you later. So, do your thing.
I've been Will Cedric.
I'm Gabe.
And this has been Inside the Bot.